cheese and it'll snap the picture. You know, it hears your voice and snaps the picture.
Well, I think we're on video now. Is that video? It's
No,
going.
I'll see a red button.
But there it is. Let's try. Let's see if we can. Let me hold it. What are you doing?
Well, I hope you enjoyed watching that video and it at least brought a smile to your face. Every time I watch that, I laugh until tears come to my eyes. Oh, that was one of the best times in my life. And in that video is my cousin Tammy. Cousin Tammy is my Aunt Gail's daughter, and she and my mother are sisters. They're very close and they're the best friends. And Tammy and I both grew up with one brother each. And so we often say, "Cuz, you're the sister that I never had." Well, I'm so thankful for her in my life, and she's coming for lunch today, and I can hardly wait. I'm making one of our favorites, and that is creamy tomato basil soup and grilled cheese sandwiches. We're keeping it simple because we want to make sure that we have plenty of time to just talk and laugh, and I think I might show her one of those videos. Oh, we had so much fun, but I think that we're even having more fun now watching those and seeing how silly we were and are. All we were doing was trying to get a selfie. Somebody help us, please. That was about 3-4 years ago, so technology has come a long way, and I think we have too. But that's another story for another day. Now, for this creamy tomato basil soup, I want to tell you what I'm doing. I'm making this homemade, no jars here. Now, I will say, when I lived in Houston, one of my favorite restaurants was La Madeleine's. And no matter what time of day, whether it was breakfast or dinner, when I went to La Madeleine's, I ordered the tomato basil soup. It is absolutely delicious. And I've tried to recreate that somewhat on my own. We don't have a La Madeleine's here in the town that I live in, so guess what? I'm doing it myself. And what I found is that these things work well together and almost come close to that soup at La Madeleine's. Now, I use a large can of tomato puree. I'm using a larger can because I want leftovers. I am going to send this home with Tammy and hopefully keep some for myself. And I also use a can of diced tomatoes. Now, you do not have to use this. If I were making this for my bonus daughter or some of my friends, I would have to only use the puree or possibly substitute this with a large can of tomato sauce, because they don't want any texture to it. They just want the smooth and creamy soup. And I love that too. But Tammy and I both happen to love tomatoes, so I know that she's going to enjoy having a little texture in her soup. Now, one thing that you can't substitute, in my opinion, is the heavy whipping cream. This is going to add the best flavor that you're not going to get from anything else. Now, if you're calorie watching, which I often am, I will substitute this with milk. You can even use a fat-free half and half. That gives you a good, thick, creamy texture, but you're not going to get the same flavor. The whipping cream is bar none. It's over the top, and most all of your restaurants that serve a creamy tomato basil soup will use heavy whipping cream. It's just the way it is. Another thing that I use is the dried basil. Now, I add this during the cooking process, and the dried basil gives this a more rich flavor. I use the fresh basil as a garnish. I'm going to cut this into a chiffonade. I'll garnish our soup with it and then add some droplets of cream for a beautiful presentation. But in the cooking process, I'm adding the dried basil because the oils will release as that's being heated up, and the basil permeates through the soup and it gives it more of that taste. Now, usually I use about a tablespoon of basil because I like the real strong basil flavor. Now, I'm going to say to you, start with a teaspoon. Let it heat up, and then as it heats up, taste it and see what you think about that flavor. If you want to add more, you certainly can. If you want to pull back, then do that too. But please, by all means, use the heavy cream. You're going to love it. And I also have some flowers here. I'm not just trying to pretty up my kitchen. Well, maybe I am a little bit. But my cousin and I share a love for fresh flowers. She absolutely loves them, and so do I. And yesterday when I was in the grocery store, I saw these beautiful bunch of pink flowers and then the sunflowers. And I said, oh, I've got to make an arrangement out of those. They're just beautiful. So this is my gift to her for coming over. I'll send her away with these flowers, and then I'll jar up some of this tomato basil soup and I'll send that home with her so she can enjoy it there as well. Well, let's get started on making this soup. Well, I've added my tomatoes, my heavy whipping cream, and I also added my dried basil. Now, when you add this to your saucepan, make sure that your heat is off. One thing about heavy cream is that not only is it easily scalded, but it also has a tendency to separate when it comes to a boil. So we want to make sure that this soup never really comes to a rolling boil. I am heating it up, but I'm just getting it really nice and hot. And then once I get it that nice hot temperature, I'm going to turn down my burner to a low temperature. Tomato soup and I go back a long way. My mother used to make this for me growing up. Mothers and grandmothers, this is a great recipe for your children. It doesn't involve many ingredients, and it's a really simple thing to make. And my oldest granddaughter, Victoria, learned to make this when she was about 8 or 9 years old. And now she is in her early 20s, and she's married, and she has a little of her own, and she still makes this for herself. And I'll get a text every now and then that says, Nana, I made your tomato basil soup and it was so good. Well, my soup is starting to boil, and I am going to go ahead and turn my heat down to low. Now, we're not finished yet. I am going to add a really good pinch of salt. As a matter of fact, I'm going to add about a little less than a teaspoon of kosher salt. You need to taste it and find out what your salt preference is with this. And also, I'm adding a little bit of sugar to our soup. Now, this sugar will not make our soup sweet, not by any means. And I'm putting in about a teaspoon. Now, what the sugar does is it offsets the bitterness of the tomatoes. If you just use your tomato sauce or your puree, it doesn't have much salt in it, and also it's very bitter. And the sugar doesn't make the soup sweet, it just offsets the bitter. So I know you may say, I'm not sure about adding sugar to my savory soup. Try it. I promise you'll like it. And you can always do a taste test all along. Start with a little and add more as needed, and make it according to your taste and how you like it. Well, I think this is finished, and I am going to turn this heat off, cover it, and then push it to the back and go ahead and get started on those grilled cheese. I've got everything ready for our grilled cheese. Now, this is a preference thing. For me, it's all about the crunch, and it's all about getting that big cheese flavor. And over the years, I have tried different breads, different cheeses, and I always come back to this. I'm using sourdough bread. I found that that gives you that texture and crunch that is so delicious. And this is not fresh sourdough bread. I will buy sourdough and I will keep it in the refrigerator, and I found that most of the time it keeps for about a month, and I will make it for toast, grilled cheeses. My husband loves it. And another thing that I do is I always keep some butter on my counter. That way, if my husband comes home for lunch and he wants a grilled cheese, I can whip it up in no time, and I don't have to soften my butter. Now, what I'm going to do here, I've already cut off the tops and the bottom crust, because I am at the end going to cut this in 4 squares, and I want it to be pretty. Presentation is definitely not overrated. And I'm going to butter both sides, top and bottom, really well. That butter and cheese and sourdough is going to be delicious. All right, that's ready to go. Now let's talk about the cheese. As I said, I've been doing this through trial and error for years, and I've tried all sorts of cheeses, but I always come back to this. This is an extra sharp cheddar cheese, and as you can see, it's shredded. And I'll show you in a minute when I'm cooking this why I like the shredded cheese. First of all, the extra sharp cheese is going to give me that cheesy bite that I want from this sandwich. And as I dip the sandwich into the tomato basil soup, it will be a match made in heaven, no doubt. Also, I like the sharp cheese because it tastes cheesier. The difference between extra sharp cheese and say a mild cheddar is only the aging process. The longer it's aged, the more cheesy it becomes, the more of the cheese flavor that you get. There's not more salt, there's not different ingredients, it's just a matter of the aging process. The milder cheeses usually have only been aged for about a month, but on the extra sharp cheddar, that has been aged at least a year and maybe even a year and a half. So that ensures that I'm going to get that delicious cheese flavor. Well, this is ready to go, and I'm going to go ahead and heat up my frying pan, and let's get busy on this sandwich. Well, I'm heating up my frying pan. Sometimes I use a non-stick pan for this, but I'm using my cast iron skillet. This is coated in enamel, so usually the things that are melted in it come off pretty easily. But to ensure that they will, I'm going to take a little bit of some non-stick butter spray, and make sure that that is nicely greased. Now my pan hasn't heated up to temperature yet. I'm doing about a medium heat, and now I'm going to add the shredded cheese. And one of the reasons why I like the shredded cheese is I like to make sure that plenty get on the edges, because that's gonna make like a cheese crisp and be so delicious. Now, I'm going to add my other piece of bread and let that get all toasty. It looks so good. Look at what this cheese is already doing. It's spilling over and it's making those delicious crispies. Those actually might get eaten before Tammy gets here. I'm getting mighty hungry. This smells so good. Now, oh, it's coming off so well. Look at this cheese. Does that not look delicious? Now to flip, I'll show you a little trick. Hold it with a fork and just bring it right on over. That is perfect. I'll probably flip it one more time and let this get a little browner, but yeah. Looks and smells delicious. I'm gonna give this about another minute and we're ready to plate up. This grilled cheese looks amazing. Look at those cheesy edges. I like using the shredded cheese because that's easier to do for me. And let's taste one of these. That's already so good. Those little crispy cheese pieces around it to me are just as good as the sandwich. Now I have my tomato basil soup. I'm going ahead and spooning this into my cup. I just got a text from Tammy that she's on the way. She literally lives right around the corner from me. So this is mine and I will do hers right after. And I'm gonna cut this up into 4 pieces. That way, they're much easier to dunk into the soup. You know what? Let me just make sure this is okay. It is so okay. Oh, even though she only lives around the corner, I might have a hard time waiting on her. I'm gonna go ahead and plate mine up. This looks so good. And I have a little bit of my whipping cream, and I'm going to take just a tiny little bit. Come on out here. And pour right on the top. And then I'm going to take a piece of this fresh basil. And I have my cutting shears here. And I'm going to top this off with this fresh basil. It smells so good. Well, mine's ready to go. Now let me get started on hers. I think I might have to take one more bite first. Delicious. Of us at the... you know, I have to say that was
That's
probably
delicious.
it. Let me taste it. Let me stop talking for a minute and taste my
That
food.
is so good. Yeah, it is the best way. Like a bullfrog.